Joining me now, Julia Manchester, reporter for The Hill, Kevin Cirilli, chief Washington correspondent with Bloomberg TV, and Abigail Tracy, writer for Vanity Fair's The Hive. With a welcome to all three of you. Okay, so ahead of the president's shutdown announcement at 3 p.m., there's one report that says he's planning to make Democrats a new offer to end the shutdown, but not expected to back down from his demand for a border wall. And then you heard Mike saying that he's not expected to declare a national emergency. So, Kevin, do you think it's going to be a legit offer, or is the president just trying to take control of the narrative here?
No. From Democrats' perspective, I don't think that they are going to see this as much of a major breakthrough. I think that this comes at a time in which Republicans are starting to pressure this administration, according to sources that I talked to up on Capitol Hill, to try to get this to some type of ending. Now, really, the past 72 hours have been dominated by this back and forth, Alex, between Speaker Pelosi and President Trump. And at times it's been humorous, but it's really no laughing matter that this is now less than or about a week and a half out until the president's State of the Union address, and there's really no major breakthrough right now in terms of these negotiations.
So, Julia, you've got House Democrats who are contemplating voting to include more than $1 billion on border security spending, but that does not include money for the wall. What's the likelihood the president accepts that offer if there's no funding for the wall? I mean, what's the point?
Yeah, I think at this point there is a very low likelihood that the president accepts that offer. You know, he has throughout the past couple of weeks been very loyal to his base, saying, I want $5.7 billion. And, you know, we even heard that even when those around him in the White House, including Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney, when he offered maybe going less on that $5.7 billion, you know, the president publicly, you know, went after him in a meeting. So, you know, I don't see the president moving anywhere on this. However, from a public relations standpoint, you know, this doesn't look very good for the president at this point. We're seeing a majority of Americans in various polls are blaming him for the shutdown. And I think Democrats are very smart to, you know, potentially be thinking about making this offer because it makes them see like they're willing to play, play in this deal. This major announcement, very interesting to see how this will play out. One thing that came to mind last night or yesterday afternoon when he announced this was, you know, it seems like a tease for a reality TV show. And I don't know how that's going to necessarily play with the American people because, you know, there are thousands of government workers who are out of work or furloughed, and that's impacting, you know, local economies and the economy across the United States. So, you know, it seems like it's almost a bit, you know, this could be looked at as a bit of game playing. So it'll be interesting to see where that really goes from here.
Yeah, game playing, not what you want to hear when you got 800,000 people and now, you know, a domino effect with this government shutdown. So, Abigail, we saw this week, I guess some would call it a cycle of one-upsmanship. There are other colorful ways, I think, to describe it between the president and the House Speaker. Nancy Pelosi was asked the president to delay his State of the Union, citing security concerns amid the shutdown. Then you have the president postponing Pelosi's weekend trip to Afghanistan, canceling it altogether, really, by, you know, pulling back the military plane. Here's how Nancy Pelosi reacted yesterday.
We had a report from Afghanistan that the president outing our trip had made the scene on the ground much more dangerous. You never give advance notice of going into a battle area. You just never do. Perhaps the president's inexperience didn't have him understand that protocol.
Do you view this as retaliation for your letter about the State of the Union?
I would hope not. I don't think the president would be that petty, do you?
How are you interpreting this? Is it a feud between Trump and Pelosi? Someone who he has yet, by the way, to give a nickname to because he's appreciated the fact her power, it's reported. Do you think there's a winner? Is there a loser here?
Right now, I think with the government continuing to be shut down, I don't think there are really any winners. But I do know that Donald Trump really views Nancy Pelosi as a formidable opponent throughout all of this. She's been very good in terms of the messaging and sort of has been one step ahead throughout all this. You saw her move with the State of the Union, and I think that really surprised and blindsided the White House. And then you saw them try to respond with canceling her trip. But I think one of the interesting things is, you know, there's a difference between canceling a trip to a war zone and the State of the Union. And I think, you know, her messaging in the day since has really kind of put her out on top when it comes to that. But I think one of the things right now, you know, this sort of back and forth, it's not really doing anyone any good. People are really looking for a conclusion to the shutdown, and sort of this, you know, back and forth one-upmanship is not really getting anybody closer to getting their jobs back,
getting
or
anything done,
getting paid.
Okay, let's move to the special counsel disputing the explosive BuzzFeed report. Before Mueller's office put out a statement, Democratic members of Congress were renewing their calls to start impeachment proceedings if this report is true. Let's listen to that.
It sure as heck explains why Michael Cohen lied in earlier testimony to our committee. We'll have to ask Mr. Cohen that.
If it's true, then he should be impeached. But let's not trip over ourselves, right? First, make sure that it's true. And that's going to happen in short order.
These revelations are deeply damaging, and this moment could be mortally threatening to this administration. There is a credible case of obstruction of justice against the United States president.
If the president did what he is being accused of, then he will be held accountable.
Look, Julian Castro being quite measured there, Kevin, but does it illustrate the possibility that Democrats in general might overplay their hand when it comes to impeachment talk relative to this story?
Well, I think it illustrates the fact that impeachment is actively now, Alex, in the political discourse and a real possibility for Democrats. And let's not forget that there is a large portion of the base of progressives who would like to see that happen. And then there is that tension, as you mentioned, of Democrats who don't want to see themselves and make the case that they would overplay their hand. I want to note something very clearly, though. When I interviewed Lanny Davis several weeks ago, a spokesman for Michael Cohen, he said that the White House was aware that Michael Cohen was headed to the Hill to falsely testify. Aware. That is very different and a very different nuance than what BuzzFeed is reporting, which now the special counsel has put out their statement refuting that report, that he was instructed by President Trump. I can tell you that based on sources that I talked to at the White House, this is a president who doesn't email. This is a president who doesn't text message. But this is also a Democratic landscape where you have people like Senator Mark Warner of the Intelligence Committee who want to hear more from Michael Cohen. And it would also suggest, and I'll keep this quick, it would also suggest why Michael Cohen originally lied when he first testified to Congress. And we're going to hear from him in just a couple weeks.
If BuzzFeed, Julia, if this report is ultimately discredited, how much does that alter the conversation about starting impeachment proceedings?
It does essentially alter, I would say, the conversation. We saw that Democrats were so quick to jump to the conclusion of we need to start impeachment proceedings, or at least think about it. But one thing that stuck out to me is, when that report came out in the 24 hours after, no other news organization was able to confirm it. My news organization wasn't, and, we weren't talking to a lot of sources that were able to confirm it. We saw other reporters on Twitter essentially saying, we didn't see this story going in that direction, or our sources weren't matching up with that. And I think that's something that Democrats really should have paid attention to, because we're already seeing it with the president on Twitter. The president is going to essentially launch an attack on the press as well as Democrats for jumping to conclusions. Alex, I can't emphasize enough how much the American, journalists in the U.S. and abroad need to play error-free ball with this administration, because when these stories come out, there's bombshell after bombshell. Just a week ago, we were talking about that New York Times report. Right. It makes us look bad, and we lose the trust of the American people ultimately.
Where do you come down, Abigail, on why Mueller's office reacted to this report?
So I think when we're looking at it, earlier in the show, you mentioned this idea of, well, if they issued such a statement like this for this report, does that mean that all past kind of bombshells that have come out are accurate? And I think one of the really interesting things is, really, if you dial in and look at the conversation that was happening among Democrats yesterday, you had a number of people immediately start talking about impeachment because of the allegations in the article. So I think when it came to, this bombshell and the BuzzFeed reporting, I think there was a different sense of urgency around it, because you also had some individuals saying, we don't even, if we can find that this is accurate, the allegations about Michael Cohen and the president directing him to lie to Congress, we may not even wait for the Mueller report to begin impeachment proceedings. So I think there was just a new sense of urgency in terms of the conversation that this report sparked that really prompted and drove the special counsel's office to intervene. And again, it is hard to know exactly what details they are disputing that wasn't outlined in their statement. But I think if there's any sort of inaccuracy at all, given the high stakes conversation that has been happening over the last 24 hours, it does make sense that they hopped in.
Okay. All three of you, Abigail, Kevin, Julia, thank you so much.